Um, among Lakota Indians at the reservation, there's a surname, a family name that's really common. It's like Smith, Jones, Garcia, and it's makes room for us. You know, so he's Joe makes room for us is his last name. I like that. I sort of want it to be the last name of Homeboy Industries. Makes room for us. That's hard to do in the concrete all the time. You know, you try to, a lot of people here right now, and a lot of people hoping for a job and a chance, and it's hard to make room for everybody, truthfully. You know, limited resources and not enough money and not enough oxygen and space, and it's tough. I had a homie, very earnest gang member, come into my office the other day, and I said, well, and I didn't know him. I said, how can I help you? He goes, I'm looking for unemployment. I said, well, you have come to the right place. And so it's tough, you know, everybody needs, especially in these days, everybody needs something. It's hard to make room for everybody. But also that idea of makes room for us is also about make room for each other. Make room in your heart for somebody who you kind of keep at a distance. The Mayans have an expression, I am the other you and you are the other me. It's not just making room for people, it's also making room in your own heart for the stuff that you find unacceptable, that you don't want to make room for, that you wish wasn't there. But it's always about making room for what you think doesn't matter, doesn't count. A parable I always think about is about 20 years ago there was a guy I knew named Louis who was addicted to crack cocaine during the crack epidemic, as a lot of you might recall it. And he was kind of well known in the streets. He'd push a shopping cart and he'd be at the gas station posted up to wash your windows or to pump your gas so he could get money to go down into the projects and get what he needed in terms of crack. He'd come into our office every day at 1848 East 1st Street. He'd always wave, and then he'd be a very humble, kind, gentle guy, and he'd make a signal like, can I have a drink of water? And I said, sure. He had a big water cooler. This one day he walked in and he was kind of tentative, you know, and he barely made eye contact with me, and I could see why. I called him in. Louis, sit down. What happened to you? His face was just rearranged. Oh, gosh, nothing, gee. You know, I ran into a wall. You know how people say stuff. I said, what happened? And he tells me that he went down into the projects and he didn't have money to buy crack. And so he sort of offered himself to this group of gang members who kind of used him as a human punching bag. Beat him really badly, fell to the ground, and while he's lying there, he opens his hand and they drop some crumbs of crack. Well, I was madder than hell, so that night I went to this neighborhood and I gathered all the homies around and I talked about it, and I said, you know, Louis belongs to somebody. You know, did you just forget that he was a human being? And one of the older homies put his arm around me and he smiled and he said, come on, G, he's just a basehead. And that's the sound of what it's like when you don't make room. I'm not going to make room for him, and he won't make room for me, and we'll keep at a distance. And that's the opposite of what Homeboy Industries is. I am the other you, and you are the other me. We make room, not just for each other, but room in our hearts for the stuff that we find unacceptable. We make room. A movie I like, an old movie, Tree of the Wooden Clogs. It's an Italian movie about a very poor peasant village in northern Italy at the beginning of the 1800s. And there's a recurring kind of scene throughout the whole movie where you have this guy who's sort of mentally disabled, who's kind of lives in the village, and he goes house to house and he asks for food. He doesn't really ask for it, he just shows up, and every time he appears in the doorway, people kind of bless themselves and say a prayer, and they give him a wedge of cheese or a hunk of bread or a bowl of soup. And he appears throughout the movie, and finally he shows up at one point, and they start to pray when he walks in the room. They always pray when he walks in. And they gave him a hunk of bread, and as he's starting to leave, two little kids in the house start to giggle uncontrollably, and when he leaves, the mother turns to the kids with great love, but very stern and clear, says, look, you don't laugh. People who have nothing are the closest to God. So we choose today to remember that I am the other you and you are the other me. And we choose today to make room.